It's Sunday, time for a shed talk. Grab your cup of coffee or your drink of choice. Let's lock in and get into it. Welcome to the Jam Shed. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Shed Talk, and lots to cover. For those of you who are new to this, a Shed Talk is simply me pontificating about things that are on my mind. It can be stuff that's coming into the feeds, questions I'm pondering, things I stumble upon, and I want to bring it to you to get your thoughts and opinions on it. And right out of the gate, we're going to jump into it. Got a couple topics I want to talk about. The first one will be Guitar Fest at Sweetwater. And then from that, a couple other topics I want to talk about are the vendors. So that'll be the next part of this. And then the last part, I want to talk about the reason why I was there. And that was to pick up the Christian Kohler custom signature speaker. And I have it right here next to me. And I want to talk a little bit about that and what's upcoming for that. So without any delay, let's get into our first topic, which was going to Sweetwater to check out Guitar Fest. My overall thoughts. That was such a wonderful event. And if you have not watched the video, go ahead and watch it. I just do a small highlight. There are certainly things I'll do differently next time. I'll capture more things that might be meaningful for you all to see. But just to give you that snapshot, it was a spur of the moment idea. I want to talk briefly about how I came to this whole situation. The short story is, I used this stuff right here. It's called Fret Doctor. Let's see if we can get it there. Yeah, there we go. It's probably not coming through as cleanly as I would like it, but this is the stuff I use to oil the fretboards on guitars. It works fantastic. I stand behind it. Again, not a formal endorsement. It's just a good product. If you have not tried it, it's good stuff. Get it. You can get it at Sweetwater. And so that's how this all came about. I accidentally spilled that bottle, and there's about this much left in there. And so I had to order more. These things last a long time. They really do, but I was really disappointed. So I was talking with a friend of mine and saying, he asked me, well, what do you use? And I explained to him that I need to order more anyway. So I jump on the Sweetwater website and I see that they have the Karnivore. They're going to be one of the vendors of the Karnivore. And by the way, they have it in stock. So I order the fret oil, and a little later that afternoon I get a phone call, and it prompted me to just gear acquisition, tone acquisition got the best of me. And so I'm down the rabbit hole looking at this. Can I get it? What does that look like? And I call to order it. And the person I was speaking to was actually not my normal gear expert. I was one of the staff there, and they were phenomenal. And he was like, hey, yeah, we can totally have this ordered for you, and you can pick it up today. They're available. And I'm like, great. Can I pick it up tomorrow? And he goes, well, if you're coming tomorrow, you know that it's going to be Guitar Fest. You might want to just come down and check that out as well. And I'm like, Guitar Fest? I didn't know about this. Well, it turns out the who's who of brands and influencers and all the rest of it were there. Now, I'm not going to unpack that any further, but that was what prompted me taking a trip to Sweetwater, to pick up this Karnivore speaker. And I got the second byproduct of that was I got to check out Guitar Fest, and it was phenomenal. So it was a roundabout way for me to say that's how the adventure came up, and that's why I did it, and I hope you enjoyed it. I had a great time, thoroughly recommend it. And we're going to get right on to our next topic, which were the vendors that were there that I had great conversation with. The first I want to just highlight, and this is in the video, speaking with Dave Friedman, that was awesome. Just his recommendations. I asked him a specific question, which was, hey, out of your line, when it comes to the thinking around high gain and an amplifier that takes pedals well, what would you recommend? And he gave me a recommendation, and someday I will have that on the channel. It's a little bit above my current budget for what we're doing here. We've got lots of stuff to unpack and look at here, so I'm not quite ready, but I would love to get one of his amplifiers. He is behind some of the most signature sounds that I absolutely love, and while I know the most determining filter is the speaker cab, this is not about the expense, it's not about those things, it's about there's an artist out there that I'd like to get their signature series, and there's a band that I absolutely love, and we'll feature that stuff on here at some point. And so he answered that question. So again, Dave, thank you for that. The next vendor I want to pivot to is I had a great conversation with the folks over at Mesa Boogie, and while Gibson still owns that company really is still housing many of those signature employees that have been there for a long time. And so I had an opportunity to chat with them, and my questions really centered on the dual rectifier, or the rectifier series. And I explained that I have several 2-channel versions and what are my favorites. And then I began to ask questions about the Badlander versus the new 1994, I think is what they're calling it, dual rectifier. The reissue is what I'm trying to say here. And my question was really from a technical standpoint. As I said, I've built that amplifier and this one. And from that, I've learned a lot. I've learned how to service some amplifiers, and that has been wildly beneficial for me and my journey in this music space, because now I have a deeper understanding of how these things come together, especially when you're ordering these parts. And I know one of the things that makes these quasi-unique, again, I'll be clear, the speaker is the most important thing, at least from my perspective. And while the amplifiers do have an impact, I'm not downplaying that. What I'm saying is that I understand that there's lots of nuance in here. And because I've built some and had that experience, I was really curious about one particular question. They had to recreate the Badlander, and they kind of positioned that as a rectifier. And I don't think they were outwardly saying that, but it was like the next thing. It kind of looks like a rectifier. It's smaller, format or footprint, and that thing slays. I've not actually had a Badlander. I would love to get one at some point and check it out and see how it fares against these. Is it really inherently different? But back to the reissue of the dual rectifier, I know that modern production parts are not including some of the signature parts that are in here. Specifically, the channel switching parts don't exist anymore, and that would require a circuit adjustment. But they would have to make that same adjustment for their modern production amplifier. So I was curious how they navigated that. And then you have these things inside these amplifiers that deliver the power and manage the power. And they're called transformers. You have a power transformer and output transformer. And while I'm not trying to make this a class, those are very important pieces, and they do have an impact on your sound, especially your output transformer. The power transformer does, and specifically about stability of power, but then how it's managed. And that's what makes the rectifiers very fascinating, because they use solid state rectification and tube rectification. And while this is not a course again, I'll explain it briefly. Tube rectification, quite simply, is how when you plug your amp into the wall, that's alternating current, AC. We use it every day. Well, that gets fed into this amplifier, but the amplifier is looking for DC current, direct current. The only difference is AC alternates between those two pins. DC is straight power. There's no alternating. It is consistent power, and that's what you need for an amplifier, because you're playing an instrument. It's going to have heavy bass. You're going to turn the volume up. You need that direct current, so you have to convert AC to DC. AC, DC, I know. Don't laugh too hard. I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek here. But you're converting AC voltage to DC voltage, and that's what you're doing with that power transformer, and why it's so important that it's matched to the wattage of the amplifier. So does it have an impact on what sound could be like? Yeah, because what comes out of your wall could be anywhere between 105 to 125. It just depends on what's happening, and that does inherently change the sound. Eddie Van Halen, famously known for using a variac so he could adjust how much voltage or how much power from the wall was getting to his amplifier, because it did something when he cranked that bad boy. It gave him more. It engaged the power section. Okay, this is long-winded here, and I apologize for all the technical information, but basically, the production of these particular transformers are no longer being made. So I wanted to understand how they navigated that. How did you shift the circuit? How did you manage a different way of channel switching? Because that's inherently going to change the circuit. The circuits in their design in the preamp and the output amp stage are the same, but there are other factors to get all of this stuff to work together to get you the sound that you're getting to your ears that you hear in a modern world of part accessibility. Because parts that were readily available here in the late 80s, early 90s, and into the 2000s, that's not the case anymore. And so I was curious, since they did all this work with the Badlander, how much of that DNA getting the reissue to market is in that amplifier. And so we had a great conversation about that, and it was so good that we could have probably sat there for the next 2 hours and unpacked this, and I loved every second of it. It gave me all the confidence in the world in the reissue, and I can't wait to hear one here, but they are very expensive and almost in the unattainable realm. You could actually probably go pick up a 2-channel for less than you could get a modern production. But I will say this, modern production means new parts. These are aging amplifiers. They need service. They need care. There's going to be some unique challenges as we begin to try to think about ways to manage the channel switching when those components go out. But you know what? There's lots of techs out there that are doing it, and it's getting done. So we can keep these things going on into perpetuity. But the best part about it is there is a modern production reissue. And if you have the ability and means, do you need it? Absolutely not. There's tons of amplifiers that do it. I built my own that totally do this rectifier, and I've not featured that. At some point we'll do this and I will get into all of that. But moving on. That was a labor topic, and I hope you didn't click off, and I hope you stick with me as we move into the last vendor that I spoke with, and that was D.O.D and Digitech. It was so cool to go to their booth. Why? Because I have been featuring their pedals like a madman on the channel and have had a ball doing it, and I was really enthusiastic about getting to their booth to see some of these pedals that I have seen in my gear feeds since purchasing these. Of course, now in my feed, I'm getting a ton of D.O.D vintage style, I'll say vintage, older pedals from this FX series and newer pedals. And so there was one I was very curious about learning about because I thought it might be similar to a Boss pedal. And I'll let the cat out of the bag here. That video will be coming in the coming weeks. And so I'm excited about that. The other pedal that I wanted to talk about is this guy right here. For those of you that don't know this pedal, this is the Digitech Whammy WH1. It's the original version, and I had an opportunity to speak with Tom Cram. And if you don't know who he is, I suggest you go check him out on YouTube. He is one of the longest lasting employees, if I'm saying this correctly. He's been with D.O.D for a long time, before it was transitioned to, I believe, Harman, and he was with the original company. He's responsible for and influenced the reissue pedals that you're seeing come out that are now in a modern enclosure and up to date, and he understood the nuances of tone and all the rest of it. So we were having several conversations, and I asked him a couple questions about specifically, you know, what's new that gets you excited. And while he was very candid and said, you know, I love all this stuff, of course he loves all of it, but I was asking him about one pedal in particular, and he gave me his thoughts, and I said, well, comparatively, is it, and I'm not letting the cat out of the bag because it's going to be a video I want to shoot, so I'm sorry I'm being slightly cryptic here. It's not to hold it from you, it's more so, and you can go look, I'm sure you'll figure out what it is. Let me know in the comments what pedal you think I'm looking at purchasing and comparing, because there's two. But I'll say this, it's centered around a parametric EQ, and so that was very interesting, or that interested me quite a bit as it was coming up in my feed, and I was curious how it tied to another pedal that I currently own. And so I want to make that comparison, and he helped me to work through how I could talk a little bit about that to you guys from their design standpoint. So I'm very excited about that. The other major thing that he said to me, which was fascinating, and it was a topic of debate from all of you. So in one of my videos, I called this pedal a D.O.D, and there are a lot of folks that were quick to tell me I called it a D.O.D. See, now I'm programmed. I don't even say it wrong anymore. Or do I say it wrong? And that's what I want to talk about a little bit. What's interesting is David Oreste, if I said that wrong, I'm sorry. Di Francesco, I want to make sure I got the pronunciation as best I could there, but that's D.O.D. He's the original creator of this company. And funny enough, Tom, I told him the story and about how I said D.O.D and that folks were quick to correct me. And he goes, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. He said, did you know David actually called it D.O.D, and he's out there, and our team is out there referencing it? And I thought, how fascinating. So he said, you're fine to call it D.O.D. He said, because David actually did. He said it's his initials, but he said no one's going to be able to say my name like well. And so he understood that. And I don't know that that's the true thing. He may have said that a little differently. Sorry, I'm not trying to misrepresent him. I'm really careful about that. So maybe it was more so he understood that the challenges of remembering someone's name, something in that realm, but D.O.D made sense to him, and so he would call his pedal D.O.D. That's awesome. So you are free from Tom. And Tom, again, if you don't know who Tom Cram is, he is really the innovator and the tone genius that is supporting keeping this lineage going forward, because he's holding this knowledge. He's been with the company for a long time, and so exciting. So if you are one of those few people like me who looked at this pedal and all your life you've seen it as D.O.D, kind of like the NBA, you could call it Nuba. Don't do that. Yeah, that was in a movie, but I can't remember what movie. Anyway, Nuba, don't do that. But you can call this thing a D.O.D because, you know, David, the guy who created the company, he did. And I thought that was just a fascinating tip. So thank you, Tom, for sharing that with me. That was amazing. And then the last thing I want to talk about that Tom and I discussed for a little bit was this pedal right here. And I will say this. I've said in the channel over and over again, be curious, explore. You probably can replicate a lot of the sounds, and there's other things I've built in this room, and we'll get into them in the future. And so that helped me to understand that there's truth to, you can really gain stage, and there's nothing inherently special about this pedal You could build it, you could use the same components, the same values. At the end of the day, you're just managing electrical current with resistance, capacitance, and a couple other variables. But if you can nail those things down, you inherently have the thing. And I think there's a lot to be said about this debate around how you have Behringer releasing almost one-to-one, well, pretty much one-to-one clones of lots of pedals. And I can see why it would be frustrating, but people still put their thoughts into that. There's something inherently magic. And I think when I did the Digitech version of this pedal versus the D.O.D version of the grunge pedal, I didn't hear much of a difference at all. It was really hard to discern the two. They sounded basically identical. I would imagine that if I took 5 of these, they'd all sound about the same, different, and like a couple percentage points. But this pedal, and I've built several guitar pedals, and I've checked them against their counterparts, and they are pretty much identical. No different than the difference I saw between the grunge that's the Digitech version and the grunge that's the D.O.D version. But this pedal was the first one I'd ever really went, I don't know that you replicate that. And when I talked to Tom, he said, you can't. He said, we have tried that. So with the WH5, which I've had that, and I'm going to bring one back to the channel, I recorded with it. It was awesome. But then I went down the rabbit hole because I wanted to see what was inherently different about this one. Now, I don't have the WH5 currently. I will get another one here. And at some point, I would love to do a shootout between the two of these because it was quite awesome. But I will tell you, this is one of the few times I can say, first off, in a recording setting, you're probably not going to notice the difference unless you're trying to highlight what this thing does. And I didn't know this, but the calibration feature on the WH5 is paramount. And that was a huge upgrade from one of the biggest challenges with this pedal. And so for those of you that own a WH1 or looking to get a WH1, it's very important that you make sure that this is still in calibration. They can get misaligned, and that will change your ability to get the full octave that you would get that you put this to. So if you're a huge Rage Against the Machine fan or a Pantera fan and you're like trying to get those squeals, you can get it with the WH5 for sure. But if you're looking for the artifacting that happens, and the only way I can describe that is it sounds like a Robotronic muted voice kind of in the background at all times when you have this thing engaged. You can hear this like Robotronic thing happening. I think they call it glitching, and it's really cool. It's wild what it does, and if you have this cranked, you can hear it. Now, Tom Morello stands behind this. He's the guitar player for Rage Against the Machine. He's one of my guitar heroes. He's on my Mount Rushmore. In fact, my Mount Rushmore is quite crowded because I think there's about 10 or 12 people on it. So that's just me, because you know what? I said before, the only rules, there are no rules. So my Mount Rushmore has more because they deserve to be on my Mount Rushmore. My top 10, realistically. But it was awesome to hear from him some tips and tricks, and I'll share some of that. But back to the difference, the modern production WH5 does have a classic mode, and that's what I used for a recent recording. And then I got this, and I got a chance to kind of hear both of them together, and I do have that recording at some point. Like I said, I will do a proper shootout of these pedals at some point. But I really wanted to hear does it do the thing, and I found this one pretty reasonable as compared to what they're actually selling for. I got very lucky. So back to the hiccup. If this thing comes out of calibration, it's not going to be able to be calibrated, and that's what makes this so unique. And there's a reason why they can't replicate it. They cannot replicate it because the chip on the inside of this is like a blending of digital and analog. And the chipset that does this artifacting and the amount of work it takes to get it to be calibrated, none of that exists anymore. And back in the day when they were making these pedals, you had people in there with like a computer. Imagine an old computer that's a green screen. That's just what I'm imagining. And you got a guy in here tweaking variables on the actual chip that's inside here. And when those things go out, that's it. They're done. So if you have one of these, care for it well, because it is hard to get the sound of these to be replicated, especially, it's more so the artifacting. But when it comes to the recording, it's hard to really tell the difference between the two. And you know what? The WH5 does a great job, and so does this. There's not one that's better than the other. I think both designs are fantastic now having both. But this does have an it factor in the sense that it does this artifacting thing. But do you need it? Absolutely not. And unless you're highlighting it, you certainly don't need it. So this is one of the first times in my history of demything things, like, is there something special about a Dumble? Yes, he built a circuit, and if you knew the circuit and you had the variables and you could measure it, you would be able to replicate that. There's no inherent magic sauce, but there is inherent design, and that's what makes and sets them apart. Like this 5E3 behind me sounds like a 5E3, but now I've modded it out, so it sounds like a 5E3 on steroids. Fun stuff. back to this. If you have one, take good care of it, steward it, and if you don't have one, go get a WH5 or any of the series because they're all phenomenal. And because Tom has given time and visibility to these things, he's ensuring that he's trying to keep the spirit of these things going. But first time in my history that I can say, well, this thing does have something special about it because the chips that are in it, they don't make it anymore. And unless someone comes along and spends a lot of R&D time to do that, we won't have a reissue that does this unique artifacting that happens here with this unit. So that being said, I want to finish with this last part, which is what's up and coming. And I said the whole trip that I took, the reason for me going to Sweetwater was to go pick up the Karnivore, and I have it right here, right next to me. And I have opened the box, but I have not taken the Karnivore out yet. And so we're going to do that right here live on the channel. We'll get a first look at it. It'll be a quick look, and know that a video is coming here soon, and I'll talk about that here just in a second. So let's pull it out. The only thing I did is I cut the strap, and I just want to make sure that it was looking okay, but it's still in the bag. Didn't take it out because I wanted to share this moment with you. So here it is. We've got it in the bag. Let's go ahead and open it. Oh, wow. That's not what I expected. I thought, I guess in some of the videos when they were showing it, I thought the dust cap was more like a G12 P75, and I thought when I had seen it, that was a strange feature, but maybe it wasn't. And Christian Kohler, again, this is his signature speaker that he had done with Eminence. So here, so we can see that it is truly the Karnivore here. There it is, boom. There it is, Karnivore. We've got it, and this is thumbnail time. I'm so excited to have it. I've been following Christian's pathway to getting this. I did not get the IRs. I knew I was going to get the real speaker eventually, but I was talking a little bit about the dust cap in some of the videos. I thought it had a bigger dust cap, and I know, and I know Christian has been on with like Jensen talking about some of those differences and nuances. And if you would like to get down a speaker rabbit hole at some point and learn more about this, I strongly suggest you go check out his videos. They're awesome. But realistically, Christian is a huge fan of the Vintage 30, and he has used them. He's got a 4x12 cab, and he's worked with Nolly Get Good to do some myth busting on these on the Slush and Vintage 30 and the eras and UK and 8 ohm versus 16 ohm and all the rest of it. And so great videos. Now the plan for this is I'm going to load it into this cabinet, which is full of Vintage 30s from the 90s. So 92 and 95, that's what it's loaded with. It has 295s and 292s. And they sound great. Super dark. Just as Nolly said, you can put basically the microphone right on center, and it sounds great. There's not a lot to do. They work, they do the thing. And of course, I got the rectifiers up here to have some fun with. But I'm excited because originally I thought, not that it mattered to me, because I know Christian did a lot to make sure that these got tuned well. And it really does look very much so like a Vintage 30. I mean, everything, it's checking out. It's looking real close. And I have a wall full of speakers over here that I can't wait to test against this and load into this cabinet. I may actually probably build a second single 12 cab, just like I have my other Vintage 30, which I think that one's a 92 or 95. I can't remember. 95. So we'll see. Maybe we'll have a video coming up before I do this. Maybe I'll build that today. Maybe I'll make the second cab as a single 1x12. And then this way we can see them in the non 4x12 format. That's what we've been hearing it in. So yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to build a second cab today. That's exactly the mission. I'll go get the materials and I'll build that, and it'll be a little more primitive than the one I'm using currently, but we'll land the plane, we'll get it done, and we'll have some fun. At least it'll be similar in spec. And we'll do this shootout and have a great time with it. So if you're wondering, the thing I haven't said is, well, what version did I choose? I'm going to set this thing down because it's not that it's heavy. It's just, it would be my luck that I would likely drop it, and I'd be very upset with myself that that's exactly what I did, because that would be exactly how this would go for me. I get the speaker, spend the time, travel, and have a great story, and you guys get to see real time me watch this thing go tumbleina. So this is a 16 ohm speaker. The reason why I chose 16 ohm is because what I have in this cab back here, the more of the older Vintage 30s are often 16 ohm, especially like the 90s versions. It is harder to find some of the 8 ohm ones. Now, basically anything after 2000, it was prevalent. You could get 8 ohms in there. Once Mesa Boogie started putting them in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, and their cabs making them 8 ohm. But there are Mesa Boogie cabs that I think, I'm not sure on that, maybe not, but I would imagine that there's Mesa Boogie cabs that have 16 ohm Vintage 30s in them. But like your orange PPC 412 is running 16 ohm. if you're wondering what the difference is, and again, this is technical terms, it really is about that output transformer. Some of you who look at the back of your amplifiers, you'll see an impedance match. So 4, 8, 16, sometimes it's 8, sometimes it's 4 only, and they want you to match the load. Well, you have to do that, otherwise the amps will just detonate your transformers, and you don't want that. What basically happens is, it's not seeing a load, so it's just trying to deliver power. It gets really hot and melts down. That's what happens. And then the imbalance, it's kind of like saying, hey, you're looking for this load so you can be balanced. And that's why they have them there. Now, one of the things I have found with the 16 ohm speakers, but you have to know your amplifiers, and I don't recommend you do this if you're not able to measure and have good confidence that you're within the range. But there is a reason. I call it a deviation, 4, 8, 16. So there's 3 deviations. As long as you're no, I'm not saying that. You can be, in a technical standpoint, 1 deviation away, because when you measure the speakers, they're not like perfectly 16 ohms. They're less than that. Somewhere between 14 or 15 is what they are, which is much closer to 8 ohm. So there's this, you can run a 16 ohm speaker on an 8 ohm tap. I don't recommend you do that. That is not the recommendation I'm making. I do that because I understand the amplifiers that I'm using and that they can handle that. But what I found is it actually gives you the same punch as having an 8 ohm speaker. At some point I will test that. Maybe I'll have to get an 8 ohm Karnivore and do the 8 ohm tap and then test that, or find, I don't have it, well, I guess I do have some 8 ohm vintage 30s, so maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll pull one of these vintage 30s and do a single test, a 16 ohm running on the 8 ohm tap of the amplifier versus the 8 ohm running on the 8 ohm tap, and see how close they sound. But you can hear a punch clarity, and there's a reason behind that, because the way the windings are on the output transformer can give you a little more oomph in how they pull power, so it's going to put more to it. So I would be very careful. I would not recommend, if you don't know your setup, to not do that. I do, and I'm very comfortable, and I understand what the risks are with that, and I accept that the risks are you can fry some stuff, and that's not a good thing to do if you are not having enough experience to understand, is your amplifier okay with doing that. So all of that being said, very excited for the Karnivore. Let me give some final thoughts on all of this and what's up and coming, and we're going to land the plane on this episode because holy cow, it's been very long, and my apologies, lots of rambling. So for those of you who stuck with me to the end, thank you. There's a lot of excitement here and lots to unpack. So upcoming in the future, this week, we're going to get out just hearing this Karnivore and hearing it in its state, and there will be more tests to come. As far as building the second cab, I'm going to try to do that today, see if I can land the plane on that. If I can't, it'll just be featuring the Karnivore and what it sounds like against just a regular Celestion and all. Won't be a perfect test, but at least we'll get to hear it, and we'll have some fun with it. So regardless, we will have a video this week. And then overall, Guitar Fest was awesome. If you've never been, I totally recommend it. Just be prepared. It is 100% a festival, and it was packed, and there's a lot of people there, and there's a lot of movement, a lot of things going on. Sweetwater did an awesome job. Overall, what a unique way to come to this particular Shed Talk. I call to order some fret oil, and I now have a Karnivore in my possession, and went to an amazing festival, and it was awesome. And now I'm back here sharing all of this with you in a long video, and thank you for sticking with me. We're 35 subscribers in, and this journey gets more exciting every time I get to talk to you and post. So thank you for giving me your time and your energy and your support. You guys are amazing. And if you're new to the channel, hey, I'm glad you're here. Stick with me. We're going to keep having fun. And I wish you all a happy Sunday. I hope you have an amazing work week. And I hope this passive content was supportive to get you motivated to get out there and try something. You do not have to part ways with any money to do the things. I'm parting ways with money because I'm having some fun with it. And this is stuff I wanted and would purchase regardless. And so I just want to say thank you to all of you, and I hope you have an awesome week, and stay tuned because the Karnivore video is coming. You guys are amazing. And with that being said, I will see you on the next one. Take care, everybody.